Can you believe that you were created to reign? We've been given a mandate to rule. In Genesis chapter 1, as God created humanity, he presented us with a mandate that we are to rule, to reign over creation. That mandate applies to every single one of us as human beings. It's part of what it means to be human. But when you think about reigning, we don't all think about reigning in the same way. Some of us think about reigning and it just seems like a natural concept to us. We naturally take charge. In fact, if we see a vacuum, we're going to step into the vacuum and we're going to fill it. Others of us don't like to be in charge. In fact, we have a hard time deciding what to eat, much less taking charge of a situation. And so we have a difficult time with the concept of reigning, but sometimes the difficulty we have with the concept of reigning comes down to our picture of what reigning really looks like. Maybe we have a picture of reigning that looks a little bit like Ebenezer Scrooge, for instance. Scrooge is, of course, one of the most famous characters from Dickens's A Christmas Carol. He's an unforgettable character, really. When you meet Ebenezer Scrooge, he's walking down the sidewalk and people are like getting out of his way to avoid him. Dogs see him and scurry away so they don't have to be near Ebenezer Scrooge. It's Christmas Eve, and in his counting house, it's cold. Ebenezer Scrooge is in his office. And he's got a small coal fire going. Out in the counting room is his clerk, and his clerk has one lump of coal. He's cold, and he comes into Scrooge's office because that's where the coal is located to get another lump of coal. And Scrooge threatens to fire him if he takes that lump of coal. And so the clerk goes back out and warms his hands instead over the one candle that he has to light his work. That's Scrooge, right? And when we think about Ebenezer Scrooge, we think of his miserliness first. And yet at the same time, here we have a picture of a man who controls everything and everyone, twisted into his own dark little world. And that may be your picture of reigning, particularly if you've ever experienced someone like Ebenezer Scrooge, whose reign feels like tightening control over you. But that's not what it means to reign. That's not what God does. That's not what God calls us to do. And that's not what God wants for creation. God has something entirely better in mind. And it is for us to reign, for you and me to reign as he does. But at that point, you probably ought to pause and think, wait, does that mean God is thinking about me? You see, that's really the thought that David is having as he begins Psalm 8. He begins praising God. He says, God, you are wonderful. You are majestic. You are glorious. You are powerful. You are the one who created the heavens. And then he asks, what am I that you even think about me? If that's who you are, to realize that you think about me blows my mind. And I think we, like David, when you really think about it, recognize God, the Creator, thinks about you and me. And then he commands us to reign. Now, what does that mean? To understand, let's dig in a little bit deeper to Psalm 8, because as we do, we see that the Lord shocks us by placing us so high. In verses 3 through 5, we read that God places us just a little lower than the heavenly powers and the heavenly beings. In verses 3 through 5, David writes, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor." He's saying, God, you are the one who made all of those bodies up in the skies. You made the moon, you made the stars, all of those stars. And you created the heavenly places and filled them with heavenly beings, angels, archangels, and other beings in heaven. And then, after you did all that, you placed us, human beings, just a little lower than all that. And when you think about what power exists in those heavenly spaces and realms, it's mind-blowing, really. When you think about the sheer power that is in the sun and recognize that God said, you are just a little lower in the order of creation than the sun itself, it is astounding. The sun is obviously a giant ball of gas and fire. It's so big, though, that over 1 million Earths, 1 million of our planets, could fit inside of the sun. And every second as the sun explodes with energy, it releases every second 650,000 times the amount of power that we use on Earth in an entire year. And the sun is just one star among many in a vast galaxy of stars, and one galaxy in a vast universe of galaxies. And David says, God placed us just a little lower than the moon and all the stars, like the sun. And then he says, God, you placed us just a little lower than the heavenly beings. And think back to Joshua chapter 5 for just a second. And that becomes all the more astounding. In Joshua chapter 5, Joshua is the leader of the nation of Israel. And he's getting ready to go into battle against Israel's enemy. And he's confronted by one who looks vaguely like a man. But he can tell that this being is something more than a human being. And this being reveals himself to be the commander of the Lord's army. And Joshua falls down on the ground in reverence, awe, and fear before this heavenly being. And that's what human beings do in the face of angels and the beings of heaven. And God says, no, you are just a little lower in the created order than all those heavenly beings. And then in verses 6 through 8, David says, God, in addition to placing us just a little lower than the angels in the heavenly spheres, you've placed us over everything in earthly creation. Verses 6 through 8 continue. You have given him, that is human beings, man, dominion over the works of your hands, and have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the sea. And if you've ever read Genesis chapter 1, you're reading Genesis chapter 1 here again. Because in Genesis 1, as God creates, he creates what? He creates the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, and the livestock. And that's the list that David makes here. These are the orders of creation. And David is saying, God, you have put us over all of these orders of creation. God, you have put us over all the earth. When you think about the sheer power that exists on earth, that thought too is just mind-blowing. It means that you are over the blue whales. Think about the blue whale for just a second. They're nearly 100 feet long. They can grow to about 100 feet long, and they weigh up to 400,000 pounds. You're over the blue whales. You're over the peregrine falcons. Peregrine falcons are the fastest creatures on earth. When they dive, they reach an airspeed of 240 miles an hour. You're over the peregrine falcons. And you're over the ants, and you say, okay, wait a minute, what? There's 7 billion plus of us. There are 10 to 20 quadrillion ants on the planet. I put the zeros up on the screen so you can just count them for yourself. It's a lot of zeros. You're over the blue whales, the peregrine falcons, the ants. You're over all of creation. It's shocking how high God places us in creation. And then it turns out the Lord actually expects us to reign. He gives it to us a charge in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. This is really, in some ways, a pinnacle moment in creation. In Genesis chapter 1, it's a high point. God has made all the orders of creation. He's created humanity, and now he pauses to bless us and to give us a charge. Genesis 1:28 reads, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And so he blesses us. He tells us to multiply. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth with human beings. And then have dominion, have rule over those beings on earth. The question is, will we reign or won't we? It's a big charge. It reminds me of a scene from The Crown, season 2, episode 5, and a poignant speech by the Queen Mother. See, The Crown is a streaming series about the history of the British monarchy, and in season 2 you reach the 1960s during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. And during the 1960s, there was pressure from journalists and from the cultural elite to open up the monarchy, to make the monarchy more accessible, less traditional, less surrounded by pomp and circumstance. And in a scene where the Queen Mother is about to join Queen Elizabeth at a very modern type of event, the two of them are walking down a hallway, and the Queen Mother is putting on gloves, white gloves, and she's pulling them up like she's putting on a suit of armor or like she's putting on boxing gloves and getting ready to go into the ring. And what she says before the two of them walk into the room sticks with me. She says, "The history of the monarchy in this country is a one-way street of humiliation. Small wonder we make such a fuss about curtsies, protocol, and precedent. It's all we have left. The last scraps of armor as we go from ruling to reigning to..." This is the point where she pauses and she thinks. And she says, "To being nothing at all. Marionettes." And as the British royal family is considering the difference between ruling and reigning and being nothing at all, it makes me think of the dilemma that we face in this command to reign. Will we do it or won't we? If we do it, what does it mean? Will we do it right? Will we do it well? Or will we just advocate and fade into irrelevance? To reign really boils down to living out three tensions that help us to understand what it means to reign. The first tension is that we are taming, yet transforming. We're taming, yet transforming. We're taming. In the beginning, when God created the world, he gave us a command to tend the garden. And he's saying that this garden is one thing, and it is going to become another. I have purpose for it and direction for it. It is wild. You're going to make it into something more. We tend, even under the best of circumstances. But now creation is fallen. All of creation is touched by the consequences of the fall. It's living in the age of fears and tears and longing to be something more. And that means that when we address nature, sometimes we have to change nature. We have to take out the evil and emphasize that which is good. You see, nature can be beautiful, but it's not neutral. It's not neutral. Sometimes we're taming it, and sometimes we're transforming it. The second tension is multiplying yet maturing. You see, the Bible commands us to make more human beings. In Genesis chapter 1, God told us to be fruitful and multiply. In all of human history, it's the only command that up to this point we've kept pretty well. And yet it bears mentioning that God commands us to make more human beings, to raise families, to have children, to teach them faith, to pass that faith along to future generations, and to send them out into the world. And yet, the Bible commands us to make more human beings, but we need better human beings as well. Remember, creation exists in the age of fears and tears right now, which means that creation, Paul says, is groaning under the weight of its own problems, under the weight of the fall. It's longing to see us be who we were created to be. But the truth of the matter is, we're only going to be revealed for who we truly will be in eternity. For now, we too are fallen. We're doing the best that we can, but we are called to step forward as the image of Christ grows inside of us, to grow in wisdom, to grow in the image of Christ, that we might be good stewards of the world that has been entrusted to us. We're multiplying, yet maturing. And the third tension is we're ruling yet renting. God commands us to rule. We are to rule over all creation. He's given it to us. And yet that mandate comes from him. Creation is his. So while we rule, we are more like renters. God is the owner. We are the renters. We use it for his glory according to his rules. We keep those three tensions in mind. Taming yet transforming. Multiplying yet maturing. Ruling yet humbly renting. And that's how we can reign. And when we reign, we get to be like Jesus. Hebrews chapter 2 takes the words of Psalm 8 and applies them beautifully to Jesus. Helps us to understand Jesus' own journey from becoming human to being resurrected and reigning. Hebrews chapter 2 essentially says about Psalm 8, well, it talks about the sons of man, referring to all of us, but it refers as well to the Son of Man, to Jesus. And it helps us to understand his journey of becoming human. He is made human, and in that sense, he takes on this nature that is a little lower than the heavenly beings for a time. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, it starts, but we see him, that is Jesus, who for a little while was made lower than the angels. He took on a human nature in order to live our lives, to take on our sin, and to die in our place. But then Jesus is resurrected, he's glorified. And Hebrews says, just according to that promise in Psalm 8, apply it to Jesus, and you see Jesus now rules, he reigns over everything. Verse 8, go back, and it says, now in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside of his control. God left nothing outside of the control of Jesus Christ. Jesus is the one who reigns perfectly. But Hebrews adds realistically in verse 8, but at present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. He's in charge of it all. But we don't get to see that right now because creation still resists. Now Jesus, the Son of Man, will bring this age of fears and tears to an end. The Bible tells us that Jesus will return. And when Jesus returns, he comes in glory and power. He's going to destroy death. He's going to end evil. He's going to put an end to sin as well. And when he does, creation itself is going to be made right. It's going to be resurrected. Jesus will rule completely over everything and hand that rule to God the Father forever. That's what eternity is going to look like. But right now, this age that we live in, creation looks a little bit like an energetic classroom full of second graders when the teacher is called away. Teacher's called to the office, we don't know why. Parent conference. The teacher leaves the classroom with strict instructions. Read silently while I'm gone. I will be back, which lasts for about 30 seconds before one kid in the back of the classroom throws a piece of paper at another kid in the front of the classroom. Everybody giggles. People start talking. Paper starts flying. Why? Because these are bad second graders? No, because this is what second graders, energetic second graders, tend to do when the teacher's not present. And creation right now is a little bit like that. Creation is living in the era of the fall. It's the era of thistles and thorns. And if you can't see it, if you don't recognize it, picture what would happen if you are a homeowner, if you own a house and you were to leave that house for a year with no one in charge, with no one tending it. Your yard would die, the weeds would grow, your gutters would fill up with leaves, inside things would break, some pipe would spill water everywhere, mold would be all over the place, the house would begin to fall apart. Because creation right now is fallen. Creation is groaning. We represent God to creation. We reign in his name. We reign as his designated representatives in creation as he would. And when I speak of creation, I'm not just talking about the natural world. I'm talking about all of the created order. We reign over all of it, and it is groaning under the weight of the fall. One day, when Jesus returns, all of the consequences of the fall are going to be wiped away and creation will be made new again. But until then, God sends us as his representatives in creation to reign and rule over it all. So let's reign over creation as God would. When I think about what it looks like to reign over creation as God would, I think about artists. I think about Bob Ross. I think back to when I was a kid watching Bob Ross on PBS do these demonstrations of how to paint. And I think about how peacefully and confidently he'd do it. He'd start with a blank canvas and he would assemble the backgrounds and the borders. And then he would begin to look to the midground, and things just began to fill up the midground. Houses, hills, trees. It looked like they just belonged there. And then when he would draw a creek, a pathway, a bush, a flower, a person, a bird, it was like they leapt off the canvas at you. That's a little bit what it's like to reign as God reigns. We set the context. We give life. We bring out life. We create the conditions where everything and everyone can thrive. Well, what do we need? We need more Bob Rosses. We need more business owners who can think about what it is to make the world a better place, not just to make the bottom line work. We need more parents, more moms and dads, raising more families filled with more children who grow up to follow Jesus and show the world what a godly family looks like. We need more doctors who are taking the tools that they have in their hands to fight disease, to help sick people become healthy and healthy people become well. We need more people who take care of creation and don't just take from creation. We need more people who are dedicating to giving life, who are dedicating themselves to helping everyone and everything around them thrive. When I think of reigning as God would, I go back to A Christmas Carol again. And I think of old Fezziwig. Mr. Fezziwig is probably one of my favorite characters in all of literature ever. Fezziwig is a total contrast to Scrooge. Scrooge sees him when one of the ghosts takes him back into the past to see his own past, remind him of the time when he and another were apprenticed to Mr. Fezziwig. He goes back to another Christmas Eve, and on that Christmas Eve, Mr. Fezziwig ends work, clears everything away in the house, and throws a party, a celebration of Christmas for everyone around him. And you see that under Fezziwig, his two apprentices, Scrooge and the other, were thriving. They were building lives. Scrooge was on the edge of finding a wife. And that's what it is to reign. Fezziwig is showing us what it is to reign. It's not a sense of control. Fezziwig is doing what God would have us do. He's bringing out life. He's helping everyone and everything around him to thrive. I can't help but think, too, of God himself walking in creation when it was still shiny and new. The Bible tells us that God did walk in creation. God walked in creation, saw it, and spent time with Adam and Eve. Can you imagine what it must have been like as God walked through creation itself? Everything growing in response to his presence. Everything in creation as he passes, becoming exactly what it's meant to be and doing exactly what it's meant to do. I want to be like that. I want to do that. I want to give life. I want to help the people around me, the things around me, to thrive. I want to reign as God showed me how. Because that's what he commands us to do.